Welcome, welcome. This is From Saints to Sovereign. I'm Wendy Jensen, and I'm here with Todd Engar, and he is, do I say your name right?
You did. You
I've
did.
never said your name to you. And we are here because we are passionate about helping people transition and have a smooth transition to lessen our amount of suffering, if you will, as we shift from our religious paradigm into exploring our own personal journey and personal spiritual path that seems authentic to us. And so we wanted to give people who are going through this transition some great tips and just have a deep conversation, actually, is what we really want, is to be able to connect with you who are going through this transition. And I probably should introduce myself. For those of you who don't know me, most people on here do. I'm Wendi Jensen. I've been a life coach and in the healing arts for about 20 years now. And I specifically coach people who are going through deconstruction and reconstruction after a religious crisis, if you will. And I'm also the author of the Healing Questions Guide. So it's a resource for people who are deep into self discovery and using the body as a circuit board to understand your feelings, your thoughts, and your emotions and beliefs that are not, that are causing disease or dysfunction in your body. And so I love using the mind, the body, the emotions, and the spirit to be able to align us with our highest and greatest good. And that's why I'm here. So I'm really excited to introduce you, or have him introduce himself, if you will, to my friend Todd. Todd, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I'm fifth, sixth generation Mormon. I don't even know how to count that, to be
Right.
honest, but go back to at least the Nauvoo days. Um, so I left the church in 2010. So it's been 14 years. And when that fell apart, I just began an inner quest to understand the power of my own mind and to find meaning and healing in all the various forms that journey took me. And so, I don't know, for the past 14 years, I've consumed so much information regarding everything from psychology to esoteric things. Um, I've apprenticed with Native American group, been on a shamanic path for 11 years now. Um, and so I'm finding labels more and more clunky as I go along because I'm constantly changing and coming to a clearer and clearer understanding. And the labels mean so little. They encapsulate such a small fraction of who we truly are. You know, they kind of put us in these little boxes so that we can know each other, but I don't find them super helpful anymore. But I would, if you're going to put me in a box, I'd say healer because that's what really motivates me and where a lot of my attention goes.
Awesome. So, tell us why you're excited about this little adventure we're on called
Healer
From Saints to Sovereigns.
Well, yeah. So just
background.
like we've had a number of discussions talking about things, and just when people leave and their paradigm falls apart, it's very disorienting and even traumatic.
Mhm.
And as you begin to examine the pieces, you realize how damaged you've been, by these false beliefs and this waste of effort towards something that isn't real. And so there's a lot of grief, loss, there's a lot of shuffling out of relationships because the people close to you don't understand you anymore and you can't relate to them. So, it's a lonely journey. And so just having gone through this, noticing in the space, there's really not a lot of guidance for people processing this, and having made almost every mistake you can over 14 years, I've sort of gathered some ways to, provide context for and some guidance for people to really take the journey of becoming their own authority, living by their own values, becoming sovereign, because the church made us live outside ourselves. It was external commandments, external approval, external worthiness, external image, right? Instead of who am I? How do I want to live? What's authentic to me? And how can I be the best version of myself and share that with the people I love?
Awesome. I love all that. I too, when I left, I had already been trained in a lot of emotional processing, been trained in a lot of my spiritual path. I had already been, a longtime member of Gaia TV, so I've always been in that vein of, esoteric teachings or just the mystery of life. And I don't know how I was able to encapsulate it and keep it all bound up in LDS doctrine, but I found a way until I couldn't anymore. And then
Right.
all of that collapsed. I had to let go of a practice that I had been building for 10 years of, and let them know that I no longer believed in the church and no longer subscribed. And so I completely lost that practice entirely because it was made up mostly of LDS women who are just starving for spiritual validation and in their path. And then when they realized that I was no longer subscribing to the church, they just scattered as fast as they could. And I knew that would happen because I know what it feels like to be a member of the church and trying to be on this spiritual journey. Feeling like I stifled and I've hit a glass wall and I don't know where to go and I'm just starving for that expansion. And so I knew that would happen. And so the past 10 years, I've been focused on helping people with that transition because it knocked me on my butt. And even with all the tools that I had and all of these things that I had been studying, it still just threw me for a loop psychologically, emotionally, spiritually, in all the ways. And so I've been super passionate about helping people who are going through this challenge. It's really at the exit gate. I'm like, here, you're okay. Everything's going to be okay. We're going to get through this. You arrived. You're not lost. Let's help you find yourself. You were lost inside there, and let's help you find yourself out here. And so that's why I'm passionate about it. And we're going to talk about some of the main essential steps or things that we have done that have helped us in this transition. But what I would like to throw it out to you guys, because I want this to be interactive, because your wisdom is, especially the people that I'm seeing on here right now, your wisdom is so important to this journey as well. And what I'm finding out is like peer therapy and group therapy is by far more powerful and effective for people who are going through these collective traumas.
Videos now apply.
And so, let's see if I can get that. And so when we get together like this, we actually get to feed each other and we get to validate each other because we finally get to be real and authentic and be able to share what's going on for us. So before we get into the meat of this stuff, if you feel so inclined, please share with us what you're hoping to get out of today or some wisdom that you've had as you've left church. Two things. What are you hoping to get out of today? Or what is one thing that's really helped you as you've been through this transition? You can just raise your hand through the screen and I can call on you, or you can raise it through the chat line. I don't always see very well. Anybody want to share?
I'll share.
Yay, Mel! Mel's my best friend.
So Wendi and I have a similar story in a lot of ways. And I raised a big family. I was in it to win it. And so the thing that I've been, and I left, invited to leave.
You got kicked out, girl. Be honest.
Yeah, I got kicked out. I'm so threatening. So so it was a really slow pull out of that. But what I'm hoping to get today out of this is it's just been The last few years have been interesting to watch how the dynamics of leaving the church have changed when people leave now, and there's like the website, you're not getting excommunicated anymore. That happened. And so I've just kind of like loosely held to some of these groups because I already took the course at the very beginning when Wendi started this. I did her course and it was super helpful. And so I just wanted to kind of come back on and see where things were at with people and the struggles that were still going on. Because I know for myself, it was really hard, even though I knew all the stuff that was coming down the pipeline when I got excommunicated because I'd studied myself out. I, like when he said, it knocked me. I did not think it was going to rock me that hard, and it really did. Because I started having to, after the deconstruction, I had to rebuild all of that again. And your mind is so programmed to believe a certain way that I really struggled to rebuild a foundation that I could stand on. And so being able to have that sovereignty and being able to make decisions for myself has been a really critical space. And so I'm just kind of, wondering where people were at these days and what the struggles still were, because I'm sure that's still the same thing. But what groups are out there? I know that, I'm on several groups of Wendy's, but that's about the only one. I don't get on Reddit and I don't do a lot of stuff like that anymore. Studied myself to death
Yeah.
earlier.
I'm
So
done with this.
yeah. Yeah. So anyway, there's a whole new thing going on with Joseph Smith right now that somebody sent me all the stuff on a week ago, and for the life of me, I can't pick it up. Yeah. So
Yeah, you're like, I just don't care anymore. If you're like me
yeah.
anyway. Wow.
Yeah. So anyway, and I love to meet all of, some new people, and I'm traveling, and so I can get on and be friends online because that's all I have.
Well, thank you for coming. I have on the queue, Gabe. Is it Gabe or is it Gabe's Green? Sometimes I don't know.
It's Gabe.
Oh, awesome. Thank you for coming.
Yeah. So I was born in the church and I came out as gay in 2020. And so about 4 years, 3 years actually, I was just kind of pushing it, just keep going to church, keep doing this. I was actually living with my fiance for a while. And last December, I decided, these puzzle pieces just haven't fit. They just don't fit.
Match up.
So I just realized, maybe I should just stop doing this. It's just I'm struggling to just make myself fit into that spot, but it just doesn't work. So, and then since coming out of the church, I'm realizing all these truths and these different things that I just don't feel like I've just been hidden from everything, and just having this kind of veil, for lack of better words, is being opened, and I can actually see what's actually happening now. And it's really interesting to see all the truths I've been kept from. And I think what I'm wanting to get out of this the most is trying to figure out how I'm going to go about doing this myself without. I've been out of this for about a year, so I've started to learn like what I can do without the church. It's been tricky, but it's been nice to know that there's other sources out there that can help me, and this empowered former LDS group has been really helpful, which I've really enjoyed. I think what I'm looking for most is being able to cope with everything by myself and with other people, rather than looking to the church and its sources. Because I've always been told to look inside the church, always inside its own sources, and it's always been tricky trying to find outside sources. And now that it's been really eye-opening, which has been good. And then another thing that I've been looking for, let's see, is keeping a positive view on people that are still in the church, like family members and friends, without keeping that separation from the church and family and friends, knowing I can still love them and appreciate them for who they are. But yeah, just trying to find that separation, that line between them and the church.
Awesome. I love that. I love the vulnerability, and I think we can all relate. I know that I can. Thank you for sharing that, Gabe, and thanks for coming.
Yeah, it's good to be here.
Anybody else want to share before we move on?
I can go really quick.
Yes, please
Jamie,
do.
I'll turn my camera on so you can see
Yay.
me.
Oh, and you're right side up.
I fixed myself.
Yay.
So I'm Jamie. I met Wendi. How long ago was this? Like officially a month, 3 weeks ago. Anyway,
Probably.
I'm I'm pretty firm in the foundation that I stand on. I have been out. Let's see, my son is 11 and a half. So just a little background, and I basically grew up in the church. My mom was a convert in 1990, so I was 9 when I got baptized, and never felt like I fit in. I was a stepchild, um, and then always found myself on a different path. Never had good Mormon friends, and always I was told that I was never doing a good enough job, so I was never fit into the box that I was supposed to be put in. And anyway, did all the things right, got married in the temple, became a mom. That was the first thing that was I was told my lot in life was to become a mom and be a faithful wife.
A mother in
And
Israel.
so anyway, that didn't work out. I married a very terrible person that turned out to be a narcissist that attempted to ruin my life. And it has taken me 14 years to get him out of my life. We've been divorced since 2010. In that process, I ended up, so I was divorced in the church. So that already makes you feel like an outcast again. And then I found out I was pregnant just from a relationship that I was in. And not only was it just a pregnancy, it was a pregnancy by a Black man.
Oh.
So I was scorned by my church and by my family for being pregnant out of wedlock and also with a Black child. And if you go back in the history of that, there's a lot there too. So anyway, I was told that even though I was already a mother of 2 from my previous marriage, I was told that I wasn't fit to be this child's mother and that I need to give him up for adoption.
No.
And it just tore me apart. And I mean, he's 11, almost 12 now, and is still to be told that I wasn't fit to be this child's mom and that I needed to give him to a family that could give him an eternal life because I wasn't capable of that.
Yeah.
It was just heart-wrenching. So anyway, I started doing my own thing. My sister was on her way out as well, so we became a lot closer as we worked our way out. There's a lot more that goes into this, and I don't have to go into
Unfortunately,
it,
we don't have time for that.
but anyway,
that's
my story, and I'm really happy to be here.
With it.
I'm just I'm happy to finally meet Wendy's acquaintance. We've been like, I've been kind of like how you said how Todd was kind of lurking. I was doing the same thing, so I'm happy to be here.
Todd was lurking.
I love the ones that are quiet and silent and then they just show up in your life in magical times. It's really pretty cool. So thank you for sharing that, Jamie. So if we're to go on here, I would love to hear everybody's stories. Y'all, I could just be here listening all day, but we really want to go into presenting some content and then sharing what you feel about the content and what your insights are on that. So I guess the big question is, I'll let you start, Todd. Okay. What are the big deals? What if you had just came through the exit gate, and most of us have been out for a while. Maybe Gabe is probably more fresh than a lot of you here that I know anyway. I don't know. Ashley's a little bit fresh, aren't you, Ashley? So like what are the top major things? Like what's going on when we're actually having a faith crisis? Religious.
Okay. If
crisis.
I kind of touch on some common themes that just everyone who shared brushed up against, where they didn't fit. They felt like they didn't fit or they weren't good enough. Those two things are common, right? My sexuality confronts the doctrine of the church. My situation confronts the doctrine of the church. My being confronts the doctrine of the church. I don't fit. I fit all the boxes that should fit in the church. My race, my sex, my everything. But I didn't ever feel like I fit, because the doctrine of the church is artificial. It's external, and it's an insult to your soul. And that's not something you're allowed to question while you're in it. Instead, you're taught to question yourself in a negative fashion, to where you're always, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with me? So one of the things the church does is it weaponizes us against ourselves. And the journey to sovereignty is flipping that around to where you become your ultimate advocate, where you are a true lover of yourself, all aspects of yourself. And in that journey of doing that, internalizing your love towards yourself, it naturally expands and extends to life and everyone else. And that, to me, is provable through your own experience. Nobody needs to convince you of it. So what I'm all about is leading you back to yourself, changing those introjects, or those voices that we were programmed to put in our head, where we're not enough and we're bad or we're this or that. I mean, the reality is I was never as ill at a soul level as when I was righteous.
Good way.
That's the reality. I've done 14 years of healing since then. And I'm way happier, way more peaceful, way more compassionate, all the things that was supposed to lead me towards, right? So that Roadrunner just showed up. He's been showing up all week.
Yeah.
I'm kind of unsure where to go, because I really kind of want to feel into like what people are confronting now, because for me it's been a while, so I don't know what's immediate, what people feel is like pressing on them today. And if there's anyone struggling or just wrestling with something today, and it can be anything, I'd like to know what that is and see what we can offer.
How we can navigate through that. I want to kind of piggyback on top of what you explained. The crack through my window, literally, that let the light in, so to speak, as Rumi tells us, is when I finished the Healing Questions Guide, and I realized that so many of the issues that go on in our body have to do with a belief or a developed contempt against the self.
Yeah.
And when I researched that, I asked myself the healing question is, when is the first time I experienced contempt against myself? And it's like I got images of myself being a very young child, seeing images of Christ on the cross, bloody, scary, gruesome images, and then being told that that had to happen in order to pay the price for something that I either had done or will do in the future, that was some kind of equivalent exchange, if you will, for who I was at my soul level. And so I'm researching back through this and realizing how I was conditioned to constantly be in a state of repentance for who I was. And not observing my mistakes as lessons, but observing them as an affront to my inferior state and my inferior condition. And so my mind was bent in a way to have contempt against myself.
How old were you when you went back? Like what age were you when you have that first memory?
In my mind, I was like 3, reading. It must have been in church or something, in pictures and images of a dark Gethsemane and Christ on the cross. The thing that really bothered me was like the thorn on his head and the blood coming down, and the idea of piercing the flesh with a nail. Like my mind is trying. It was so traumatic to me, and then to associate that with that was done for me. It just created this. That must have been, I must have done something so terrible that that's the equivalent exchange to make up for it. And I don't know if other people mapped on that way. We all kind of digest the doctrines different, and but that's how it impacted me. And I realized that all through my religious experience, being raised a 7th generation LDS, that it was Sunday was my day to confront my continuous broken self and to always be in a state of disappointment. Like I almost got addicted to this emotion or chemical reaction to disappointment. Like if I wasn't slightly disappointed in myself, I was in some level of danger or pride or arrogance where I would be disconnected from God. And that was like going deep, deep into the dark shadows of how I was really processing the religious piece to that. And my whole goal, even as a child and even into my motherhood, is I just want to prove that I'm good enough. I want to prove that I'm a good person, and I want to prove that I'm obedient. And I want to prove that I'm a good mother, and I want to prove to the church and to my leaders and to my peers and to God and everybody that I can be a good person. And that started the people pleasing. that goes into a longer discussion, but that's basically what you were saying, Todd, is that I don't fit in the box, and it must be that I'm the problem.
Yeah.
And that's the big deal. So does anybody else want to share something that tag along to this conversation, this piece of the conversation?
It's the same stuff. The same.
Anyone else?
Humble came in there. If you ever felt like you weren't, you had to be humble enough to continually be on that repentance path. And so for me, it was just like, oh, I can't even think good of myself, because if I think good of myself and, then I'm not being humble, and I'm not being in that, humbled, repentant state and always improving. And so I think we get stuck. Some people get stuck on that too. I know I did. Like always, what do I have to do? Like what you said too. What do I have to do? Never looking at all the good things that I already was doing. Are you kidding? But what more can I do? And it just became so exhaustive that I couldn't even do it anymore. And then I just started studying. And of course, I'd been studying that whole time. And I'm like, wow, this really shouldn't be this hard.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, no, I feel all of that. And I think a lot of that can also be contributed to the idea of what humble is. I've reconfigured that now.
Yeah.
I was humble so long as I was suppressing my real self, so long as I was appearing the way they wanted me to appear, so long as I was giving God all the glory for any goodness inside of me. That was me being humble. And this idea of
but not shining too bright though either. Don't shine too bright.
Oh, yeah, you have to gauge yourself.
Like there's a certain level you can reach, and don't go above that.
Yeah, and if there's anything good coming through you, give all the glory to God, because it's dangerous to soak in or absorb any of that attention or that affirmation or validation in any way. And so there's like this like a glass wall, if you will, between me and what God, between who I was intrinsically at my soul level, which was I have shadows. I'm messy. I have feelings. I have emotions. I go off the rails. Sometimes I lose my temper. Sometimes, and pretending like that portion and piece of me doesn't exist. So I only show up as the good person, which actually created a bifurcation, if you will, of my soul. And compare this soul that I was deep inside was almost like an enemy, we're told, an enemy to my holiest part of me. And that is my authentic, my true, my raw, messy, real self, that I created contempt against that. Any thoughts on that?
I just say, I said it in the chat, but yes to everything that you just said. That's so perfectly worded.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting. Celeste or Colette put on here that I'm the problem.
Mm.
There's something really ironic about that idea, because really it's our mind and the way it's been shifted around and configured through their lens. That's the problem. And you actually have the ability to go in and rewire it and recircuit it to your highest and greatest self. And that's when the suffering actually ends.
Yeah.
And there is no problem. So, no, you're not the problem, but the answers and solutions are inside of you.
Yeah.
Right.
I kind of want to jump in and just
please
express some of the things that were touched upon in the sharing of everyone's story here, especially yours, Wendi, where you said you were 3 years old and you're exposed to this picture of extreme violence. When you're 3 years old, you have no inclination towards or understanding of that kind of violence whatsoever. That just is not in your being, right? And then to see that and then have that link to that's because of you. So the natural interpretation of that is there's something wrong with me. And I don't understand what it is that would necessitate or cause that kind of pain. In fact, I can't even deal with that image. Like, you have no critical ability or understanding, and you're told this like it's a good thing. And I just want to point out how, like, if there's a definition of evil, how evil that is.
Right.
And then the other thing I want to point out is that first thought of I am not enough, there is something wrong with me due to an experience which is emotionally overwhelming, is the definition of trauma. It
Say
is
that
the
again.
definition of trauma.
Can you say that
And
again, Todd? So good.
we bifurcate or we fragment our consciousness at trauma.
Yes.
We become divided. There's part of us that's bad. There's part of us that must be repressed. There's part of us we can't express. And then this wires into how we need to behave in order to survive. So our natural healthy mechanisms are used against us. And we think there's something wrong with us. And you can debunk the doctrine. You can intellectualize it. You can say, oh, I know it's all not true. But those subconscious effects of trauma will continue to replicate and repeat in your life, in your relationships, in your thinking, in your habits, in your actions, in every aspect of your life, until you begin to make yourself whole, which is to undo that fragmenting process and be present to every feeling you have as if it were a tender child that is you. And to love yourself is the path. And ironically, that's what Jesus taught. So I have no problem with Jesus. It's the Christians, you know.
Exactly.
So that just really came. I wanted to point that out. Like, so the natural effect of that is that we would all be struggling with trauma, that we would all be struggling with fragmentation and recombining, remembering ourselves, rejoining ourselves together. And there is a lot of information in the spiritual world, the psychiatric and psychological world, neuroscience, all this that points towards healing our mind and soul. And one of the things that Wendi and I have been talking about lately is how this needs to happen in groups, how we need to actually meet together and share experiences so that healing can take place. It's not enough to watch videos, read books. We have to kind of see where we're wounded together, talk about them, be seen in that, and be aided and supported in remembering ourselves. And this is, we talked about, is we want to create a space where it is absolutely safe to talk about what hurts, what you struggle with, what difficulties you face, because we're so programmed to put on an image, pretend we're okay, and then silently we punish ourselves and tell ourselves we're not good enough as we repress our real feelings.
Yep. It's so true. And I know with the healing that I've done, I actually, after getting out of a narcissistic relationship myself, first of all, I didn't realize just how groomed I was as an LDS woman to be a target to predators.
100%.
Yep, I had no idea that was going on for me. But I realized in my healing from that situation that I became so obsessed with what he did to me and his personality and what is he up to next and this is a lot of like how we are when we're leaving the church, because it is a narcissistic institution. So we do have remnants, kind of the echoes of the same pain that happens to us. But what I realized is that it wasn't until I looked inward and see the impact that it made on me and what part of me was like magnetize that into my field as a canvas, if you will, to understand what parts of me were yet underdeveloped so that I was like interacting in that experience. And so same with church. It's like we can spin around in this wounded cycle of victimhood and martyrdom, watching, and I'm so grateful for Mormon stories. I'm not downing them at all, but when you watch it over and over and over, you're re-wounding yourself. And we are still focused on the church and what the church did to us. And our invitation is to come inward and say, okay, how did it impact us? How do we recall our own power? How do we step back into our authenticity? How do we reclaim ourselves and heal that initial wound that you are not enough and that there is some external source outside of you that you are obligated to perform for in order to qualify for the love that was always been yours to begin with. It is your love that you crave, and that love is sufficient, but the process is calling it all back from all the places that we gave it to that didn't reciprocate that love for us. And so that's why I'm passionate about doing this piece, is because it is confronting psychological, emotional, and spiritual abuse. It goes unmeasured and it goes on invisibly until we start to give it a voice and call out what happened to us. And we are conditioned in the church that when we do that we are being cruel or mean or hateful when we call out the abuses that we experienced, and that we are pretty much conditioned or groomed to stay quiet about what we disagree with and what doesn't feel right. And so I'm excited to create an environment where you're safe to disagree and you're safe to challenge what's coming up for you, and you're safe to share, realizing you're not going to be judged, because that is a new environment. And to me, that's the healing space, is that we can create collaboratively as members who have kind of been wounded in the same house.
Mm.
And so that is kind of what I'm excited about. What is the question I need to ask right now? Anybody have something coming up for them they would like to share?
I have some things coming up if nobody else wants to share.
No, please do.
There's two things I'm still struggling with, to be real honest. One of them is like today, I'm by my sister. I'm in Missouri, and my sister lives in Missouri. I haven't visited her very often. And so she asked me last night, she texted me, do you want to go to, because I was asking her what time she'd be home today. And she's like, well, do you want to go with us to church? And I'm like, oh, no. And so I could feel that little bit of like, for myself, because honestly, I'm tired. I worked so hard at getting everything so perfect and so right with raising my kids, and now having to help them unravel themselves from what I taught them. At the same time, I'm unraveling it for myself. And even though it's been a while, I still feel myself, like that little thing right there, going to church. And it's exhausting. It's emotionally exhausting. And so the part I feel guilty about still, even right now, other than that, like going to church, is I have not solidly for myself figured out practices that I feel I can be consistent in. And that's one of the, of course you can always meditate. I mean, there's so many things you could do, right? Study on Sunday, but things that I want to do to consistently stay with as a practice of my own spirituality. And I feel like if I'm not doing something on Sunday, like I need to listen to, and I haven't listened to preachers for a long time. That was the first 5 years out. So that's hard because I'm like, I've got it. I still don't have a practice. And then still feeling, and also the piece of knowing my own self and going to that higher self and being able to hear that, because we got so severed from that, or at least I did, from having to go to our leadership or letting the priesthood that was in our home have the last word, no matter how we felt about that situation or that decision. It was always defaulted to the priesthood or to leadership. And I lost myself in that as a woman. And being able to, I don't know that I'm totally connected to that yet. And that's frustrating. Making decisions all by myself, living all by all the stuff. And I'm by myself. I'm divorced now also. And I live, I've always had kids around. I had 8 kids, and not having anybody around anymore to like that whole decision process and trying to make big life decisions. Like I'm trying to buy property right now. And that just feels so overwhelming. So overwhelming, and just living on my own for all the big things. And it's just, sometimes I still feel like I'm out on the first, I go back to those first few early years when I was just out on some huge ocean. I couldn't see the end up, and I didn't have a paddle or a sail, and not knowing where the fuck am I going. And sorry, excuse that.
No, we're allowed to cuss here.
Yeah.
No words are.
So I'm like, here I am again, because I'm trying to buy property. I'm like, I can make this decision. I can do this. And I'm like,
Yeah.
But it's still so hard. I'm like, why is it so hard to just connect and be able to like know? And see, I'm just catching myself again. The right answer or the right decision. And I'm like, what if there's not?
There's no right decision.
The thing is, just do something. Do something. And I'm like, oh man, I just did it again. Like, what if there's not a right? So it's those types of things. I'm like, when am I going to be out of this little?
It goes deep.
Yeah.
It does. When you're in it, I was, I'm Wendi. I mean, my ancestors came across from Europe and were bodyguards of Joseph Smith, like 6 generations in. My kids are 7. So, yeah, that's still what I'm struggling with. Seems like it should be so easy at this point. Yeah, that's right.
For me, it seems like that it's not getting any easier. I'm just getting better at dealing with it. That makes sense.
Sure. Yeah. No, that's true. Yeah.
I love that. What I came up for me is that first of all, what qualifies as a spiritual practice? We were taught this is what qualifies the sacrament, going to the temple. We were pretty elaborate and about the things that we did as members. I mean, to the tune of a white hanky going, whatever it was we were saying. One day I looked at that and went, no, that's really too weird. Wearing aprons and hats and just all of that is what we associated a spiritual practice with. And what if it's just going out in nature and just being still and finding feathers and finding bees that come and hang around with you and knowing that you're in the presence of the divine and that you are the beloved. And those places don't happen at 10 o'clock every morning or 5:30 before the kids go off to school, or every by yearly as a big general conference that we sit down and make cinnamon rolls with. It's like all of these things are shifting for us, and so it's almost like if we don't have this specific routine, we feel again like we're deficient instead of celebrating that present moment and going, how holy is this? And how sacred is this moment?
Right.
And
being able to recognize that. Thank you, Wendi, because those things, I know you know me well enough that yes, the bees happened this week. And of course they haven't. Yeah. And so wow, thank you. Because those things are, but yeah, still feeling like I need to have because at the beginning, how many of you did this? How many of you explored all the different things that you could do instead of go to church? Like I explored meditation, I explored nature, I explored, my thing, and it's still on some of my profiles. Nature is my church and love is my religion. And so, doing all the, and doing the saging now. And I mean, there's just a whole bunch of things I've tried, right? And you've probably done the same thing. And I'm like, and for the last few months, I haven't done a thing. Think I'm just tired.
Mm-hmm.
And that's okay.
Yeah, and that's okay too, right? It's okay.
And part of what I wanted to say to Melanie is, while you were expressing that, you were actually recognizing where you feel and what you feel. You were expressing it to us, but you had the recognition and you were holding space for yourself to feel that. And that is a spiritual practice. Mm-hmm. That is reconnecting with yourself. That is being real, being vulnerable and accepting all in one. And so you were doing it, and maybe just adding that recognition piece that it happens moment by moment, that, maybe the only thing you were really creating with yourself is the thought that maybe you aren't okay, that it should feel different, that you should be somewhere that isn't reality, that thought is creating the thought of I'm not enough, I'm not where I should be. And it's just a simple perception tweak to you are okay, you are doing it, and it is a process, and you're loving yourself, accepting it is, asking honest questions, sharing authentic information. That's as real as it gets.
Thank you.
I agree with that. And to your message about feeling like you should be over it by now, because we came out about the same time, about 10 years ago. And we both went through divorce, and then we both had some interesting relationship things happen. And if you look back, 7 generations of my genetic material being deeply programmed. And the very minute I entered the Earth's atmosphere, it was already ingrained in me, even in utero. And then I was immediately blessed, just a few weeks after, into this whole institutionalized programming. And me coming celebrating that now I'm seventh generation that's carrying the gospel through it, and how wonderful that is. But no, I came here to disrupt that, to interrupt 7 generations of psychotechnology that's been imprinted on my genetic material. And I think it's just supposed to go like that. And it's going to be weeded out of me because I no longer subscribe. That is us being super, maybe not aware of if that's the only thing we do in this life, that is enough.
Yeah, thank you.
Because I am
6
not
generations before
perpetuating
didn't do it.
Because you know what?
Breaker.
Reteaching your kids is, yeah.
Sorry, I'm pretty worked out. Go ahead, Bonnie.
Sorry, I just jumped in there, but being a cycle breaker takes a lot of energy. And so sometimes you need to rest. And so doing nothing is okay.
Yeah, I'm realizing.
Can I share, Wendi?
Yes, please, Ashley.
So I'm sure I'm not the only one, but the whole church thing for me, I'm recognizing as more of a secondary trauma, really, for me. Because I grew up in a home where it wasn't safe. And so church was my safe for a long, long time. And so that's what's like even trippier in this whole journey is it's like, this has been like this, like was where I felt safe. And this is where I felt like I found who I was. And so then for it, as I went through that healing and was in a safe place to where I could actually see things, I feel like how they are more realistically in my brain now. And then I'm like, wait a minute, like that's when the whole not fitting in the box came, when all of a sudden what was healing to my, inner child wasn't in alignment with what the church was teaching. And then just some other interesting things that have come up that I don't know if some people can relate is a few things. So I'm an energy healer and I was working on a client a number of Sundays ago, and she was talking about how she went and got a genetic test, and on the testing, it came back a percentage of Mormon. I was like, what the hell? Like, that's not, so like when you're talking about like, it's ingrained, like it's showing up on people's, like no longer are you a percentage American, percentage Latino, like you're a percentage of Mormon.
I
What
like a new ethnic group.
What website was that? Was that ancestry.com? What was that?
I will have to ask her what test, she went and paid
That's
because
crazy.
she wanted to know things like that. And I was like, you've got to be kidding me here. Like this is, but then I don't know. And then just in some of I'm really connected. I don't know. Sometimes it feels like a curse, but I'm really in.
Pass a little dribble over here to me.
I'm really, and Melanie, I want to talk offline about how you got excommunicated because I'm like, maybe I can follow that path. Anyways, sorry. So,
good story.
With that,
Good story.
I feel deeply, I've come from a long line of Mormonism, not only that, but of mental illness. And as I have been trying to break the cycle, because I was told when I was younger, this is just how, your great-great-grandfather died in a mental institution. It's just who we are. It's just what we have. And then when I started to learn more about the science of the brain and how we can change things, I'm like, I choose not. Like, I choose not. And so as I started fighting that cycle, I had an uncle that died by suicide. And whether, you can think it's woo-woo or maybe it was or wasn't. But anyways, he came to me and he told me the reason that he died was because he could not be enough here. like the reins, he could not be enough. And I am just like, we are so far off. Like we are so, where did we get lost? Where did we get lost in thinking that we aren't enough? You know, and that just kind of spiraled it all when I realized that a lot of my mental health challenges has been deeply rooted within the church, and to the point where my husband is seen. I mean, my husband's still trying to change the church from the inside out, which I did for a number of years, you know, and so I'm trying to hold space for him as he's held space for me, you know, even though I'm like, can we just be done so we can spend more time together and enjoy life? It's, you know, trying to be patient with all that. But, you know, he's seen too. I mean, I've been on the brink of dying by suicide, you know, and I'm like, and I try to explain to members that are, oh, Sister Bishop, I'm like, can you please not call me that ever again, ever? You know, but you know, you're going to come back to church though, right? And I'm like, if they understood like that it's pretty much life or death for me at this point, going into, you know, participating in church activities, even I see everything so different. I mean, they have ward activities or whatever, you know, and it's almost painful for me to have my whole family go and me be at home. But it literally is so just deeply rooted that it is a life or death thing for me. And so it is, you know, and I talk to people. That's one thing the church did good, I guess, is created a community, you know, but it's a pretty toxic one if you, I don't know, it's just, it's like you have different glasses. I can't unsee what I've seen. Yeah. And it's like and I have a hard time explaining to people when we have really deep spiritual connecting conversations and they don't understand why, you know, why I can't just come to church and stuff. And it's like, I can't unsee what I've seen. And so I don't know. I feel like that's what I'm dealing with now is I feel like I've healed a lot of the inner child, like Wendi, when you were talking about your experience as a child at church, like mine was a little different. Mine was at home. Mine was not having basic needs of food and shelter and love, you know, like those basic needs were stripped of me. So as I go and I sit and I heal with that, all of a sudden, you know, and if anybody studies trauma, the secondary traumas are always, you know, secondary wound, all of it. Sometimes it's harder. So for me, the church thing is a secondary trauma, and I'm starting to realize that. And so thank you for having spaces like this that really give us tools and resources and connections. Because yeah, Wendi, I bought your book long ago. And if my mom probably knew the work that you do, she actually bought it too, because we were at a conference or something and she was using the book. And I'm like, you know, my mom's having a super hard time with my journey right now, and she loves your book.
I read it before I left. I wrote it before I left. So,
but so we just hold space, just trying to hold space for people. But I'm also understanding, like, I wouldn't understand the bashing, why people would bash. I'm like, oh, but sometimes that comes like to the brink to where I just want to lose my mind and just be crazy. And, you know, I've been dealing with the Tooele Temple open house, and oh my gosh, that was so many emotions, you know, and people would ask me, are you going? And I would tell them, absolutely not. That is not beautiful. What is beautiful is when someone goes over to someone's house and says, hey, how are you? Or invites somebody into their space. That is beautiful. And I will not teach my children that that building is beautiful. I refuse. And then there's grief because I prayed and fasted for that building. And now it's here. And I told my friend, she's a police officer in Vegas. I said, I see why people go to prison. I'm like, I want to blow it up. I want to find a way to just blow it up. I want it gone. So anyways, I've over talked, but thank you for letting me share. It's really healing.
I appreciate that, Ashley. Yes, thank you. We are just about, we are at our time limit here. Todd, was there something else that you wanted to say about what we were just talking about?
You know, you and I have talked a bunch, and we want to create community. We want to create safe space. We want to create support. We know we are all out here trying to do this alone. And how I think we've just reached a point where that's unnecessary.
Yeah. You don't have to do it alone.
And you know, we tried to like determine what we were going to talk about and how we were going to do this, and we ultimately decided like, let's open it up, let's include everyone. So I'm really pleased with the result and the authentic sharing that came out, and hopefully everyone feels like this is better than what I came in with, whatever expectations I had today when I joined this call, that this was more rewarding and satisfying for you at a soul level than you would hope. That's my, I feel like it worked very well. And I was nervous and in my head about it. And, but just Wendi and I just naturally have this kind of affinity with ideas and how we want to contribute to our community. And I just want to say thank you for showing up.
I love that. I do know, I want to direct this specifically to Gabe, because he did mention how he's trying to figure out how to cope without the church as a resource. And then also his other one is keeping a positive view of his family and friends who are still in. There is no way that one person evolves in the same exact way as another. And I use this in my analogy of the dragonfly, how the body inside of that dragon nymph, that's a water creature, their dragonfly body is 3 times the size of their exoskeleton that they will be shedding soon. And they have to take the risk of becoming prey by getting out onto a reed into the sun so that the sun can complete the rest of its process and the rest of that metamorphosis, if you will. And so up until that point, it's been learning how to draw in air and deal with the water at the same time, preparing its body for its last shedding. And so when it comes onto that reed from the pond or whatever body of water that it's emerging from, it's very vulnerable. And it's risking being eaten before it even gets to expand and explore who it really is as a land creature and an aerial creature. And so many times it's so alone, but they have to do it alone. There's no true dragonflies doing this at the same time. And so it is our journey of coming into ourself and allowing that natural process to happen. And it makes all the sense in the world when you figure out you're a dragonfly. You're like, I have wings. I have freaking wings. And the world out here is amazing. And what am I going to do next? The food is different, that everything is different. And the first thing we want to do is look in the water and go, guys, we're dragonflies. We have wings. It's not bad and scary out here. It's amazing. It's so free. And there's so many things that we get to learn. And there's so many things we get to do. And it's almost like you see through the water and they're looking up at you going, you shouldn't have gone above the surface of the water. Now you're never going to come back. Not realizing that we don't want to come back. Not realizing that if we were to come back, the weight, the water in our wings would actually cause us to die. But we can look in the water and accept that they probably have 2 or 3 or 4 moltings, if you will, before they're going to be ready and ask the same questions that you asked. That if you were to reach in and pluck one of those dragonflies or dragon nymphs and put it on the reed and say, look, you're going to be a dragonfly, its body and its constitution would not be ready to handle the awakening that it's having. It has to have it happen organically and in a way that they can process it. Because what you don't realize is the strength and courage that you have to step outside the boundaries of the doctrine. To you feel natural, but it's not something that's natural for everyone. Not everyone can handle the ridicule and the judgment and having to self-orient again. Not everybody is prepared to do all of those things. They're still in a process of essential evolution before they get there. And part of our own evolution and expanding in consciousness allows us to look at them in different stages and say, and even that is perfect. They need that incubation in there before they're ready. And I just happen to wake up early instead of saying something's wrong with me. And I use the acronym for love, and that is let others voluntarily evolve. Love them right where they're at, which is exactly the grace we're hoping that they will give to us. And if we allow them to love them, even though it seems like they're so twisted and so confused and they're believing things that do not make any sense to you at the present moment, when you're in that space, you are actually gathering momentum towards your own evolution. That when we have regret, resentment, anger, or this deep desire for them to understand us and accept us, it actually tethers us to the past, and it causes that process to maybe slow down a little bit. And that's okay too. I'm just letting you know that when you let go of that and you accept that they're just in a different place, and that's all by divine design, it's almost like you have wind beneath your wings and you get to take off more and not have to feel like you need to bring everybody along in order to be understood. Because the understanding you really want is understanding and accepting who you are and your journey. And we're not taught to do that. So was that helpful, Gabe?
Yeah, it was super helpful. It's really nice to have that insight to know that I feel like when I first left the church, I just had to completely put all of those things I learned aside and completely relearn new ones.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a lot of morals and values I can take from it and I can still keep there. I don't have to just throw it all away, that's been hard for me to do, but it's been nice. Thank you for that insight. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I realized once when I looked over LDS doctrine with new eyes, I realized that everything that is good about being a member of the church is not exclusive to Mormonism. That's exclusive that it is common to the patterns of love, acceptance, harmony, peace, and unity. And everything that is exclusive to Mormonism is actually toxic. That it actually feeds the ego in a very unhealthy way. And when I could do that, I realized, yes, I was taught good and bad in the same place, but my heart and my soul knows how to sift through the difference. So hopefully that is encouraging. I have this common thing that I do, and that is go over time. Anybody who's been in the class with me knows that I'm chronic for this. So what I'm going to do is actually go ahead and end here. But those of you that want to stay on and want to brainstorm with us for a minute, please do. I'm just going to end the recording right here. If I know how.